called for us and so we appeared. We got a GGM IOU for YOU.
It took me too long to realize both my episodes have something to do with the mass eradication of a population. What is wrong with me? Anyways, it's time for us to get into reading some comments. Oh, and if you die along the way, then give us an "I'm dead" to let us know.
Perfect. I was getting irritated at not being able to kill your chances of winning.
Know what? Sure, I'll be happy to destroy your debates like unused gravestones. Now quit stalling.
Good old Whippet Theater says, I think the only thing Jack has holding her back is her other personality, but realistically, as long as she stays as Genocide Jack, I think she has much stronger advantages. Generally, better fighting skill against a wider variety of opponents makes her far more likely to roll with the many weird twists and turns Undertale presents, along with her intelligence advantage, allowing her to traverse it with greater ease. I think all of her advantages are enough to outweigh her biggest weaknesses. Even if she struggles to kill all of them due to her more pacifist nature when she is Toko, I think her higher intelligence will allow her to find other ones while she's Jack, unlike Zack, who admits himself that he isn't the sharpest tool in the shed. Or heck, she could just scout out areas as Toko and then turn into Jack when needed. Loey did mention that there are methods Toko has to turn back and forth freely. In some way, Jack has worse weaknesses but better strengths, and betting fairly on the chance that she'll sneeze isn't as strong as her many advantages thriving. I definitely agree with the fact that Jack is just overall the more skilled and smarter killer between the two, which definitely leads me to believe that she'd be the least likely one to get killed off by any of the monsters in the underground. Her experience with evading incoming attacks from people like Sakura makes me believe that she'll actually do a better job of dodging all the different projectiles in Undertale, while I see Zack just running headfirst into the fight without a good battle plan. And yes, while he is very resilient, if he keeps trying this tactic throughout the whole underground, he is definitely going to get himself killed. Jack murders with passion and conviction. She isn't as unprofessional and sloppy like Zack is.
Jack may have better strengths, but it doesn't mean Zack is that far behind. Jack has plenty of combat strength and a higher baseline intelligence, but I think it's actually more likely Jack would jump in headfirst instead. When Zack was on his own, one of his common strategies was to isolate targets and kill them where there were less people. It was different when he was fighting through different floors, but in that case, the only other people inside the building were Floor Masters and Rachel. Like 6 people tops. He couldn't really act in secret as much when they had eyes on him constantly. Jack having more experience fighting large groups of targets is good, but Zack has had more experience over the years keeping himself from getting caught and overwhelmed.
It's true that Jack may not have been doing this for as long as Zack has, but even a monkey can fall out of a tree, slip into a coma and die. Jack has still been doing this for quite some time too. She literally has been killing since she was in elementary school, chasing her first love all the way to Goku just to kill them. Plus, even if Zack has been killing longer, his main targets have been normal people. Jack has experience killing robot bears, martial artists, and mech suits, which leads me to believe that she'll be less likely to get caught off guard by all of this.
Less caught off guard, yes. Willing to go out of her way to hunt every monster in the area? I don't think so. There's more to this than just being able to spill the dust of monsters, as Baron Karza says in the next comment. Hoping someone reads this. I'm probably in the minority of viewers who at least know who Isaac is, so I might as well give my 2 cents. On paper, Jack seems to take the win, if the challenge was who can complete the neutral run, which she very much would win. The problem is the challenge is who can finish the Genocide route, which is a different story. In the Genocide route, you need to go out of your way to kill every monster in the underground. This includes monsters that are just idly minding their own business as you go looking for every monster in the area. And from my understanding of Jack, it's not like her to kill randos she comes across in the street. Like most real-life serial killers, she only kills specific targets. And in this scenario, I only see her killing in self-defense only, or killing for fun if she finds a cute boy. And unless she's a monsterphile and finds any monster cute, I don't think Jack killing anyone outside of self-defense is unlikely. It's unlikely she'd get a much higher body count than the average player on their first neutral run. Zack, on the other hand, is not only indiscriminate in his killings, he's actively gone out of his way to kill stuff like birds. And considering how much he loves killing people and watching their terrified reactions, the really only kind of targets Zack doesn't kill are people who are suicidal, and unless forgetting something, no one in Undertale would be begging Isaac to kill them. Point being, Jack would be more likely to overcome the challenges of Undertale given she's a better fighter. Isaac would be more likely to attempt a genocide run, thus I think he wins. You were within the minority of viewers who knew Zack, but the majority of those who commented for him. Don't worry about it.
Monster File. God, that's so rancid. I guess I should have expected this much scrummy stuff when I wanted to go for the Genocide Jack. Come on, Naegi, more like
It's true what Baron says. This is a challenge to complete the Genocide run, not a neutral run. And as terrific as Genocide Jack may be at taking lives, I'm afraid Toko is going to hold the kill count back. If anything, both Toko and Jack are going to be focused on racing through the underground as fast as possible to get back to Byakuya. Zack not only has the bloodlust to go after all the happy-go-lucky monsters, he has the planning to keep it on the down low so he's met with less resistance. Jack has definitely killed in secret, but I think her experience fighting Monokuma drones out in the open in hordes is going to make her more likely to let herself be overrun by numbers. Zack might do a frontal assault in fights, but his years of self-sustaining lead me to believe that he can take his time to kill as many as possible.
Honestly, Byakuya could be a good motivator for Jack and Toku to kill in the first place. If she realizes the monster's plan to take her soul in order to take back the surface, she could think that putting a stop to all these monsters will result in getting brownie points from Byakuya, praising her for taking care of the monster problem. Also, if the monsters do try to ambush Jack all at once, that's only helping Jack by making the monsters come to her rather than vice versa, which will only make things easier for Jack to kill off everybody. I mean, she literally has experience taking out entire armies of Monokumas just fine on her own. Besides, even if things do get a little bit more hectic than she'd like, she has been willing to retreat when necessary before. Like how she helped Kamau escape the Monokuma ambush at the roof at the start of Ultra Despair Girls, or escape the collapsing subway. Heck, her fight with Sako and If shows that she knows when she's outmatched physically, and knows how to change her approach to a fight, while Zack on the other hand is going to be much more stubborn and is going to keep trying to win at the monster while taking unnecessary hits.
Jack could learn of the goal, yeah, but it'd still take a bit before she even finds a monster who tells her about that plan. Even then, how likely is she to listen if they're trying to kill her? And not all monsters are going to go out of their way to surround her, only the ones able and willing to fight, like the Royal Guard, higher tier monsters. Regardless, Jack would have to backtrack at that point long after the monsters had evacuated. Zack is the only one going out of his way to kill everything no matter what. Even if she thinks Byakuya would praise her, her modus operandi is gonna hold her back and slow her down. Say she fights robots all you want, the monsters are living creatures, and she may quickly learn that killing them isn't like breaking toys. Zack has his own strategies that differ from charging in head first. From backing targets into a corner, taking them by surprise, waiting for the right opening, and knowing when to not just rush into a fight when he's held at gunpoint. He's an idiot when it comes to books and lacks any substantial sense of caution, but he's shown his fair share of critical thinking in a bind. More than most would think, anyway.
I don't think Jack is going to be pulling any punches against the monsters here. The fact that Jack has never had to deal with anything like magic before may make her believe that these are just some really complex robots or something. Now, that may sound a little far-fetched at first, until you take into account how unbelievably lifelike people like Monokuma are, or other people like Kirakuma, or Monami. Helps that again the monsters don't really bleed like most real creatures do, so that may help as well in making her think that she isn't killing anything of importance. Not like they'll be able to tug at her heartstrings either, considering when Shirakuma tried to befriend Toko, her first instinct was telling Kamaru to shoot him, so I doubt she'd be willing to trust people like Toriel either. Anyways, let's see what Lucas has to say. I think Genocide Jack will make like her namesake and whip through the underground. Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. For one, she's better equipped to deal with the underground's stronger monsters. She has more experience fighting larger and stronger enemies and is more capable of evading attacks, can take stronger hits, and has attacks that could deal more damage. I mean, I'm not talking from experience, but a spear bomb or scissors is probably going to do more damage at once than a single swipe of a scythe. Speaking of scissors, the way the video talks about Jack's signature weapons of choice, you think they were just like any pair. However, this is far from the truth, as her scissors, or Geno scissors as they're called, are specifically designed by the ultimate murderous fiend herself, specifically for the purpose of killing. Zack may be good with a knife and scythe, but he likely couldn't hope to match Jack's proficiency with a weapon she not only designed herself, but has plenty to spare, unlike Zack who'd had to get resourceful if he loses his. Huntsman did bring up the risk of overusing the taser to switch between Toko and Jack, which would be a big issue if it wasn't for the fact that she could switch between the two by sneezing. This not only allows her to save her taser for a time where she would really need it, therefore avoiding the risk of overusing it, but she can also stay as either for as long as she likes this way. Sure, there probably won't be any pepper lying around, but based on what we've seen in the games, she can sneeze completely at will, no pepper or feather needed. Overall, given her being better suited against the Underground's tougher enemies, having better proficiency in a larger quantity of her main weapon, and most of her weakness being much less of an issue than they seem, despite having helped defeat Junko, Jack will be the one to leave the monster waste drowning in despair.
I've already said plenty on how a spirit bomb of scissors isn't going to be all that great. From the overuse of Jack and her stamina, to the meter that needs to be built up every time in order to use it. And while he didn't go and design his own weapon, that doesn't stop him from being plenty proficient with both a scythe and a knife, as well as whatever other weapons he'll pick up as he goes. Weapons that increase how much damage you do, to the point where Jack not using anything else is more of a detriment since the monsters will only become more resistant to her attacks, while Zack will get more powerful and clear fights faster. Zack doesn't waste his time on pointless shit like crafting the perfect weapon for murder. He'd rather use what he comes across and achieve a more efficient result.
Oh, and a scythe is supposed to be better? What is he gonna do, murder a field of wheat?
Oh, and she's going to do what? Commit homicide on terrible haircuts? Jokes aside, many fictional characters use stuff that was never meant to be used as a weapon. There's more scythe users than I can think of out there, and scissors aren't any different.
Meh. Not like anyone's gonna question the efficiency of the murder weapons when they're already dead. More importantly, however, the fact that the stun gun has a limited battery isn't going to be as much of a detriment. As I said before, all Toko has to do is sneeze and poof, she's now your friendly neighborhood serial killer. She's shown to be able to do this on command before whenever she really needs to, and without the repercussions of a time limit either. As for the choice of weaponry, the fact that Jack only uses her Geno scissors isn't going to be as big as a deal as you hope. Sure, there are probably stronger weapons lying around in the underground, but keep in mind that the more you kill, the more your XP and LV goes up, increasing both your attack and defense, meaning the more Jack progresses through the underground killing other monsters, the stronger she'll become. Besides, you're again underestimating how skilled she is with her scissors. She can use it to slice up multiple people at once, use it as throwing knives, and even slice up projectiles like missiles before, which will definitely come in handy when she has to fight Undying, where she has to take her attacks head on. Yeah, Zack will probably be more willing to use the weapons he finds, but his battle strategy will most likely stay the same of just going on a mindless rampage. Jack is much more of a professional.
Leveling up goes the same way for Zack. The more he kills, the stronger he'll get. But the difference is, he'll be able to increase his strength through weapons as well. I'll admit that there are easier ways for Toko to change into Jack, but if the stun gun is no longer an option, making herself sneeze runs the risk of taking too long to work. She could be playing a bullet hell while vulnerable and barely moving, trying to sneeze. She can take substantial hits, but Zack isn't a pushover himself and has ridiculous pain tolerance. It's going to take considerable effort from the monsters to put a dent in either of them. But enough with this scissor talk. We've already taken too much time. I feel bad for Zack. Poor guy, he's probably not going to get as many votes. But surprisingly enough, I think he has what it takes to genocide through the challenge. Genocide Jack is a tenacious, furious foe who's quite potent with her scissors. That said, she actually poses little threat to the residents who idly stand by. Monster encounters are something she wouldn't actively hunt down for. She's more so someone to hunt either cute boys or robot murder teddies, and bastards who are actively being a detriment to life. Zack, though, happily murdered a dove and loves helpless victims who have little chance of resistance. Between the two of them, Jack is more likely to leave stragglers who she doesn't hunt for, which can't be said for Zack. The big bosses of Undertale stand no chance against Zack. The big exception is Sans, who I would realistically expect to mop the floor with both of them and dunk them both. But Isaac's ferocity and willpower to withstand slashing his own stomach could help him out with dealing with Undyne, Papyrus, Toriel, Asgore, Flowey, and the others. Especially since, unlike the stomach issue where Rachel had to hunt for medical supplies, there are food items to ravage and use for healing. Zack's likely to have a huge love off the bat, same with Jack. Even in other areas, I think Zack is fine. He's not as agile as Jack, but then again, few bosses compare to the agility of that girl. Jack might have come from a smarter series, but Zack's been able to solve puzzles like the gas room on D3. Jack's a tenacious and deadly foe with a side of humanity, but Zack doesn't even need to deal with a side that is far more pacifistic and possible to emerge throughout the murderous venture. All in all, I think Isaac Foster has this in the bag. Jack may have better odds against numerous and different opponents, but given the options here, I think Zack can slash a win. Oh, and also sides are better than scissors, just asking that. Yeah, I feel like an absolute clown for thinking Zack wouldn't get any support, but as a clown, it is now my job to entertain the masses. I've said how Jack would most likely ignore a chunk of the monsters, and if she ever learns of their true goal, by then I think it would just be too late and it would be harder to backtrack and hunt them down. But what I want to focus more on is Zack's intelligence. All through this debate we call him an idiot. As much as it's true, many really aren't giving him the credit he deserves. It's just as studio says. Zack helped investigate the gas room and escape. And more than that, he managed to go it alone in the final floor and figure out how to open doors and find keys without any assistance. Abraham may have been there to talk, but Zack was able to figure out basically everything without him. He may be dumb and illiterate, but his brain contains more than murder, more murder, and a dash of anger issues. Give him time and he'll figure it out.
I don't doubt that Zack will eventually figure out the puzzles, but that's the problem. He's going to struggle way more with them than Togo will, who is used to having to deal with puzzles and Ultra Despair goals. Zack's headstrong nature is really going to hinder him when he has to deal with how Undertale fights work, needing to understand how the soul works and all that. While not a one-to-one example, in Deltarune it took Noel quite a bit of time to learn how to fight. It's going to take a while for Zack to adjust to this newer fighting style, unlike Jack, who is smarter, more skilled, and is just overall more adaptive than Zack. Zack may pass through the bosses like you say, but Jack is going to excel and make it through much more quickly. Also, you underestimate how tenacious Jack is. She's such an unstoppable force that she's essentially invincible in Ultra Despair goals. Obviously, I'm not going to buff her up to something like the Invincibility Star or Supersonic, but the fact that nothing in Ultra Despair goals can harm Jack proves just how tough she is to put down.
Difference being, Noelle is a child who doesn't know bloodshed beyond a scratch. Someone who kills all the time can adapt to combat easier than some innocent deer kid. If anything, the monsters are so used to a battle system that they'd be taken by total surprise when Zack breaks their rules and kills them in a matter of moments. Dead is dead, get ready to die. Dodging dangerous projectiles and leaping over harmful obstacles is nothing new to Zack anyways, and again, Jack blitzing through leaves more room for living targets to be missed.
There's actually something in this next comment that brings up the whole having to kill every single monster mechanic for the Genocide one that I wanted to talk about. So let's see what Arcade has to say. That whole promise of making more predictions on this series from Ashley vs Penny, lol, is going to be harder here as I'm less familiar with the franchises here besides Undertale somewhat. Come on guys, come on. Can you at least pretend that you're just the biggest expert on the series we're talking, whatever. At least on my own without repeating info. But when just doing that, I would say Toko and Jack has the best chance out of the two. Now before I really begin, I feel like I should mention a little trend with some of these episodes. It's what I like to call the more often than not curse, where there's one or two massive flaws of one character that could completely mess up the chances of them winning, that the other doesn't. To me, this curse is apparent when it feels like one side has to be argued a little harder or arguing the character to do choices that, in retrospect, they wouldn't do due to a massive flaw that they have. At least when compared to the character whenever that side mentions a plan, I find more in character for the other. Well, character to do and even pulls off successfully. And then he talks about Courage and Zem and Ash vs Pennywise doing this. This is very long, so I'm just gonna skip this, sorry. Going back to the actual matchup, that curse isn't nearly as present here, because I actually think it's very close, and that they're not even aware of each other's existences. And believe it or not, this curse could apply to both. It really depends on whose weaknesses are more drastic enough to mess with the other's chances of winning. But more often than not, Zack is a very straightforward thinking serial killer that is just too headstrong of a self-aware idiot. I don't see him throwing away that spear and knife of his, assuming they're the only thing- wait, spear? I think you mean scythe, buddy. Assuming they're the only things he's ever attached to, especially in this situation, I don't see him replacing any of his weapons with what's literally called an empty gun. He also just doesn't have the experience to fight the varied monsters, and could eventually be overwhelmed, which is a big problem due to his more human limitations. And I don't see him trying to bring food items, because I doubt they would work like healing items in canon or even in his world. Jack is incredibly fast with attacking and moving as shown, and has ranged attacks from the start thanks to her scissors, which he consistently doesn't run out of. Her durability and endurance is so slouched compared to Zack's. Wait, what? This is so slouched compared to Zack's, if not better due to being more cartoonish, and not as needful as healing items even if they do work. I also don't think she's so restrictive in who she kills to the point of not attacking any of the monsters who attack her. Besides, if I remember correctly, there were monsters that supposedly survives in the Genocide one, them being alphas in the monster kit I believe. I also more or less agree with Toko being able to deal with a time limit. While I can see the stun gun being dangerous to use more than normal, there was also Toko making herself sneeze. But anyways, I think her experience over Zack is most useful. In the video, it details her fighting of all sorts of enemies with abilities, something that Zack doesn't have. She in general is also evasive and agile, and even if she turns into Toko at the not so greatest time, her stun gun should be enough for her to turn back into Jack. In terms of puzzles, I think Toko herself is far more consistently capable in passing them than Zack when alone, especially if Toko is the ultimate writing prodigy while Zack is illiterate. Yeah, I wasn't lying when I said I was going to bring up whatever was already said, but I'm still looking forward to the next part. As I said, this is extremely close and I'm looking forward to see what conclusion is made. Ultimately, I think Toko has far more reliable pros and less granting cons for Jack to let her rip. Wait, wrong Jack. Kate brings up something that I really didn't consider. In the story of Undertale, there are a lot of monsters who survived the Genocide one, like Alphys or the Monster Kid, because they managed to evacuate most of the monsters in Undertale. So you don't necessarily have to hunt down every single monster to qualify for the Sans fight or the Genocide ending. Heck, even if we consider game mechanics, you can actually spare any number of random encounters so long as you eventually get the certain number of kills in each area. What really matters in initiating the Sans fight could really just be having a high enough level of violence, and given that both Jack and Zack already have plenty of kills under their belt before even entering the underground, plus the kills they'll be getting during their trip in the underground, I think Jack will be able to qualify for the Genocide ending, especially if she kills people like Papyrus or Toriel.
Something I didn't consider, but I'll allow it. Regardless, I still think Jack is going to be more headstrong than Zack. She's too used to jumping into a sea of underlings, whereas Zack has actively kept his kills out of sight, out of mind. Zack is going to be more active in hunting monsters, and Jack can still leave herself open as Toko. I'd still be up in the air over whether or not she'd consider killing Toriel, and even Papyrus for that matter, since it's still a glaring problem that she bothers killing specific kinds of people, especially when they aren't really that evil or out for her life. Again, I'm sure she can fight well in self-defense here, but if any level of fiction has taught me anything, killers rarely expand their horizons so easily. But the horizon is quickly closing in our last comment with Akuma TH. Despite not knowing the two, based on what was presented as well as knowledge about Undertale, I'm siding with Zack. From a book in Snowden, and the crueler the intentions of our enemies, the more their attacks will hurt us. Which means even if you can argue they can't one-shot enemies since only Kara has the soul to do that, a murderer would do a lot more damage to a monster than a fallen child. With that in mind, with Genocide Jack needing to change from writer to killer, she would have a difficult time half the time against enemy monsters. After all, if her intentions is to change into a killer, it means her own intentions aren't as cruel as the two murderers. Assuming they get past Toriel, Undyne would be a roadblock because of one of her abilities is to make you stand still and block incoming attacks with a spear she gives you. If Genocide Jack only relies on scissors, then she would be forced to use a weapon she is not proficient with. Even to block it would be a hurdle. Meanwhile, a spear is just a scythe without the blade, so Zack would feel right at home. And finally, if you think someone can gain EXP from just killing in general, the more you kill, the easier it becomes to distance yourself. The more you distance yourself, the less you will hurt. The more easily you can bring yourself to hurt others. So in theory, Zack's level of violence should be higher than Genocide Jack's because she's picky with her victims while Zack is less choosy, and destroying numerous Monokuma robots doesn't count because they're basically extensions of the true Monokuma. So my choice is Zack. Zack, he's a psychomaniac. I agree that because of their level of cruelty, both of them are going to have an easy time ripping through monsters. However, where Zack has it all the time, Jack has it half the time. Jack would have no problem tearing through enemies anyways, but Toko doesn't have Jack's bloodlust. As such, I'd imagine she'd not only be a lot weaker in the face of monsters, but not be able to do much to protect herself with a stun gun, meant to stun and knock back, not kill. Jack would have no problem, but imagine she gets caught as Toko. Game over, it's execution time.
I mean, yeah, Toko probably wouldn't have the same amount of bloodlust as Zack does, but luckily for her, Jack should have more than enough killer will to go around. Toko always relies on her killer self to take care of business anyway, so that's not really something she needs to worry about. And yeah, the stun gun probably won't kill anybody, but it'll definitely knock anybody back that tries to ambush Toko, giving her the time she needs to turn into the bloodthirsty maniac she needs to slice them up. If anything, the fact that more LV can increase a person's capacity and willingness to hurt only benefits me.
She still needed ample distraction to hit basic Monokuma robots. It'd take her a minute to find that opening. I do wholeheartedly agree that Zack would excel at the Undyne fight. Forcibly replacing their weapons could definitely make Jack screw up, and while they aren't exactly the same, I imagine it's leagues easier to go from wielding a scythe to using a spear. Different blade, totally, but still a long stick with a sharp edge. Zack should definitely have a higher LV than Zack. I don't think breaking Monokuma robots is the same as killing a bunch of bears. Zack would be able to abuse that stat boost a lot more to bridge the initial gap in their combat power.
I don't think that's entirely how the Undyne fight works. She isn't forcing a spear into Friska's hands. She's actually giving the spear to Frisk in order to make a fair fight and to give them the chance to block her spears in the first place. I've already said before that Jack can easily slice through any spear that Undyne throws away with the scissors, since we've seen her be able to slice through missiles before. Why use a sharp stick when she has her trusty scissors by her side? Plus again, I think her tactic of focusing more on evasion will definitely work better than Zack's game plan. Just lead her to the hotlands for an easy kill, simple as that. I just don't think any of the bosses will be much of a challenge for Jack. Why do I feel like I'm about to have a bad time?
Now it's clear everyone saw through the facade, seeing the true debate to be had. And you know what? You guys were right. Sans does win. Congratulations, you figured it out. Here's a medal.
Look, we know they probably wouldn't be able to make it past Sans, but this is kind of like Tom vs. Zig where neither would be able to make it, but we gotta definitely see who is more likely to make it, as opposed to just saying they both lose and calling it a day. We ain't having no stupid ties. We're not cowards. So let's put an end to this.
Man, it's still baffling that Zack got just about every comment. Like, the exact opposite of what we expected.
It almost got to the point where I was genuinely afraid that I would be the second person on the show without a single comment. The first being Ducko with Stretch flipping Armstrong. But luckily I found some people who decided to stand the side of the ultimate murderous fiend.
It took considerable stretching to find those 3 comments. Meanwhile, the nearly unknown underdog got some well-deserved attention. That makes me happy.
I guess this should have been expected though. As it turns out, Zack was ultimately our winner.
Alright, we get it. It's a fake out. Jack actually won. What a surprise. Get on with it. Celebrate Huntsman going 0-2.
What? Oh, you mean that old gag? Come on, Hunter, we gotta work hard to destroy this cliche joke. But in all seriousness, yeah, I do ultimately concede and think that Zack would just make it through the Genocide one much more easily.
Say again? I can't be hearing this clearly. I was like 75% sure Jack was gonna end up winning. She's smarter and easily has superior stats. How could you have changed sides?
I was originally on that line of thinking too, and there was still no doubt in my mind that if this was a normal fight, Jack would destroy Zack, no question. But surprisingly, there was much more to this debate than just Jack being more powerful than Zack. The interesting thing about this debate is the fact that Jack had the much better advantages, but also had the worst disadvantages, while Zack was mostly stuck in the middle area with none of his stuff being too game-changing. So I had to compare them to see which would ultimately impact the results the most, and in the end, Jack's disadvantages were just too much to overcome. For starters, as much as I try to work around this, Jack's time limit is really going to mess things up. At best, the stun gun's battery only lasts a few minutes at most. That's not even enough to get through the ruins, let alone the entire underground. The only place I can think of where she can get a recharge is somewhere like the Hotlands, like Alphys' lab. But that's like a full 2 areas that she's gonna have to get through with only a few minutes of battery life. And without Jack, though, isn't really much Toku could do. I've brought up that she can use the stun gun to zap away anyone to protect herself, but believe it or not, that also uses up the battery. So that's only battery life she's wasting just knocking monsters away as opposed to just slicing them up as Jack. Now, Toko could sneeze to negate the stun gun's time limit, but there's still a great risk of her accidentally sneezing and leaving herself open, especially in more colder climates like Snowden where she could sneeze from something like a cold or something. It is also acknowledged by Papyrus that after Frisk got done killing all the monsters in the ruins in Snowden, they were covered head to toe in dust. You know, the stuff that makes you sneeze? She puts herself at risk every time she murders a monster. Zack has no such handicaps that will cause him to be as defenseless as Togo will be without Jack.
I know all too well the dangers of dust. Allergies are the worst design flaws to ever exist. But you know what's more dangerous? A guy in a hoodie with a scythe who will stop at nothing to stab your smiling face. I definitely couldn't refute how powerful and skilled Jack was, but there were plenty of weaknesses outside of a fight to exploit. And the major stat gap between the two quickly stopped being a problem when we took into account their level of bloodlust alongside the boost in strength with every monster they kill. They already had a high body count, which would make them super strong from the get-go. But Zack going out of his way to exterminate monsters as he does other humans means he's essentially grinding to level up as fast as possible. And if they try to run away, he'd just get more angry and kill them faster whenever he finally catches up to them. He'd have a tougher time with puzzles, but given he comes from a game that required him to directly figure out that kind of obstacle, gave him enough competency to make it through. Toko was definitely going to get through faster, but that was another one of her problems. She'd have to be sparing with the stun gun's battery and make it out of danger. She'd fundamentally fail the genocide route by leaving too many alive in hopes of protecting herself.
Yeah, at the end of the day, Toko and Jack just wouldn't be as willing to kill off everybody like Zack will be. I definitely don't see her going full on pacifist, but at best, they would probably just make a beeline for the nearest exit in order to reunite with her darling Byakuya. Not to mention the fact that over the course of Danganronpa, Jack actually slowly but surely becomes a better person. She's not fully redeemed, but Kamala really left a lasting impact on her, and causes her not to be as bloodlusted as she once was. But even if we decided to use Genocide Jack before the events of Danganronpa, where she was still the infamous serial killer with no remorse, things wouldn't change. If anything, that would probably just decrease her chance of success even more. She would only have experience killing normal humans, she wouldn't have access to the stun gun to allow her to change as freely, and most importantly, Toko wouldn't even be willing to change into Jack in the first place, given she wanted to keep Jack locked away before she became more open about it in Danganronpa. Now I could bring up more elaborate pieces of Undertale lore that could probably help me, like how XP or level works, monsters being weak to Killer Will, or just Kawa having some sort of influence on Jack, but that's just a whole lot of mental gymnastics needed to justify Jack committing to the genocide one, as opposed to Jack who would just naturally do it himself. His desire to kill doesn't really change all that much over the course of Angels of Death. Sure, he softens up a bit to Rachel, but in the end he still keeps his promise to kill her after they both escape. If Kawa came to tell him to start killing, he would just respond with no, Sherlock, and just start killing anyways. Which is why I believe Zack will ultimately take this.
This episode keeps hitting me and subverting my expectations. First, I get to debate for a series that nobody had heard of before without getting shot down. Then Zack got the majority of comments. And now, I won the episode. I can only take so many surprises, dang it. This was a fun episode to do. We both got to talk about games we really enjoyed, with arguably the best characters from each. Angels of Death is a game I bought on a whim, and Zack easily became my favorite character with a goldmine of quotes. I probably won't play a Danganronpa game anytime soon, but it was really fun to learn about Genocide Jack. And I got to kill Undertale characters for the second time on this channel. What a coincidence.
Well, like my name suggests, I got 2 W's and now I got 1 L. But while I am a bit bummed that I lost, I had a really great time debating you, Hunter. We definitely needed an episode together. And I'm glad I got to talk about Genocide Jack. She's a very fun character to watch, and after Ultra Despair Girls, she's become one of my favorite characters of all time. And Danganronpa is one of my favorite game series as well. Hopefully I'll be able to debate for it again and actually get a W with it. Angels of Death is also a very interesting series, and I really liked Zack. I guess I just really enjoyed crazed killers that like to go wild and laugh like idiots.
We could cackle like maniacs for the rest of the video, but Sans is usually the one who makes jokes. So how about we see what he has planned for Zack in that final corridor? We find ourselves looking back to the 2 altered timelines, where the 2 killers were having different levels of difficulty. Genocide Jack was in the middle of her fight with Undyne, who had just transformed into her undying form. Jack was slowly gaining the upper hand, when suddenly, she was unexpectedly changed back into Toko. Toko was confused and tried to use the stun gun to change back, only to realize that it was out of power. Toko pleaded and begged for her life, but it was far too late for mercy. Undyne let loose a triumphant battle cry as the ultimate murderous fiend was finally vanquished. However, the monsters weren't as lucky in the other timeline. We look back to Zack, who was already far past Undyne and was in the middle of the final showdown with Sans. Both were getting increasingly frustrated as the fight progressed, with Sans dodging pretty much all of Zack's attacks, and Zack just powering through all of Sans' bones and blasters. Sans tried to finish Zack off with one final attack, but his attack was suddenly stolen by a random dog who ran off. Using this moment of confusion to his advantage, Zack was finally able to land the one hit he needed against Sans, plunging the side deep into his skull and ripping through his body, leaving him but a pile of dust on the floor. Ha! Got anything funny to say now, you stupid bonehead? With Sans out of the picture, it didn't take long for Zack to slice through Asgore and get his revenge on Flowey for the bullets from earlier. But as Zack is about to leave the underground, he was suddenly transported to a black void. He was soon face to face with Kara. You've been busy, haven't you? Your level of violence, your execution points, your power was enough to awaken me from death. Together we eradicated the enemy and became stronger. But now we've reached the end. There's nothing left. Let's erase this pointless world and move on to the next one. Do it all over again? Hell no! That sucked! You're an idiot if you think I'm going through all that magic bullshit again. Unfortunately, you made your decision a long time ago. You have no choice. Zack gripped his side tightly and glared daggers at Kara. Then how about you make me, you little shit?